Anthony Edwards is developing into one of the best players in the NBA. Throughout history, some of the greatest players of all time have been shooting guards. From arguably the greatest player to ever touch a basketball in Michael Jordan, to the late great Kobe Bean Bryant, the Black Mamba, to the Flash, Dwayne Wade, and more, including the likes of James Harden, Reggie Miller, Ray Allen, Allen Iverson, Vince Carter, and the list goes on and on and on throughout all of the history of the NBA. The only difference between those players and Anthony Edwards is that they are past legends of the game, and Ant-Man is building his legacy right now before our very eyes.
With the first pick in the 2020 NBA Draft, the Minnesota Timberwolves select Anthony Edwards from the University of Georgia.
So Anthony Edwards with his mother and grandmother with him there in spirit. He knows which hat he can take out of that big box now, and it is the one that belongs to the Minnesota Timberwolves.
It's time to announce the Kia NBA Rookie of the Year. Would it be Sacramento's Tyrese Halliburton, Minnesota's Anthony Edwards, or Charlotte's LaMelo Ball?
That's funny.
And there is your 19-year-old Kia NBA Rookie of the Year, right. LaMelo Ball. Congratulations.
Right now.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Listen, and picked up by Beverly, and that's all she wrote. The Timberwolves are going to the playoffs.
(40-22) the score here in this fourth quarter. Edwards, a three-pointer, that won't go, and that'll do it. The Grizzlies do it again. And they move into the second round for the first time in 7 years as Minnesota suffers another heartbreaking loss in what otherwise was a terrific season for these young Timberwolves.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
With my first pick, I'm going to go with Anthony Edwards.
Okay. Well, this is interesting.
No, Anthony Edwards is hungry.
Edwards. Gordon defends on a switch, crossover, three. He got it! Kid continues to meet the moment, and the Minnesota Timberwolves stave off elimination. And this thing is headed back to Denver for Game 5. Here comes Edwards quickly, kicks near side, Prince, no. Offensive rebound, Edwards back up, and he lays it in. No timeouts left for Minnesota. Here we go, Conley looking for Edwards, finally gets it to him. Edwards launches, no, and Denver survives.
My name is Anthony Edwards. I play shooting guard, USA men's national team. Steve Kerr asked me about it during the season, actually. I was like, I think it'll be great for me to get ready for the season. I don't have to get in shape. I'm already in shape playing games already, so it should be fun. But I just wanted to play in it because like Kobe played in it, Michael Jordan played in it. Vince Carter, when he jumped over Buddy, and I almost punched Kevin Garnett in the face after he jumped over him. Or the Kobe one when Kobe was talking Spanish to Luis Scola. And Brown was like, chill, Kobe. That was the best player, so you got to do what they do. Being able to take care of my family. I just go out there and play basketball. It was just fun for me.
It's pretty special with who he's becoming. To be ready at that age, at this stage, you putting him amongst the young stars he's going to be competing with for the next 10, 15 years. And now he's becoming the alpha of them. That's why I was a big fan of him, because I saw the star potential in him. I saw the star, the superstar on and off the court. That Germany game was special. He basically put USA on his back. To be able to do that at that age is tough, bro. The international game is not easy.
He was upset that he was coming off the bench, and Steve Kerr was like, Anthony, like Dwayne Wade came off the bench when Kobe was here, and he's like, well, we don't have a Kobe.
Who is he gonna come off the bench
I know,
for?
that is crazy.
I love that quote.
He has that special, like, it's different.
That's a special kid, man. He's the future.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we are going to get right into things here today. Now, first off, before we get into anything, I do want to say I appreciate all you guys' support recently. We just reached 400 subscribers. We're on our way to 500 and up from there. Super cool community that we're building. And yeah, so I just really want to say thank you and appreciate you guys. But with all that said, obviously, we're talking about Anthony Edwards today. We are talking about the Timberwolves. We're talking about what I think they can do this next season. We're talking about how good I think Anthony Edwards can be this next season and more. So, yeah, stay tuned. Obviously, the first thing that we kind of have to tackle is Ant-Man, right? Last season, he was phenomenal. I mean, really, as a Nuggets fan, I can break it down to in that playoff series, that was probably our most competitive playoff series, was us versus the Timberwolves. Now, initially, the Timberwolves were really struggling to make anything a game, but then all of a sudden, kind of midway through the series, it was like something flipped in Edwards and, you know, the entire team or whatever, who obviously was missing McDaniels in that series. And some switch just flipped, and it started to just become like crazy competitive down to the wire for every game. We would have to come back in the games. Edwards was, you know, a shot away from pushing us to, you know, game 6, which is as far as Kevin Durant and Devin Booker managed to do. And Anthony Edwards was pretty much doing it by himself because really the rest of the team was getting eaten alive. I mean, Jokic and Murray were just dominating. And so the fact that, you know, Edwards was able to get them a game and, you know, almost force a game 6, which who knows, maybe it would have became a game 7 the way that the Timberwolves were rolling. Honestly, I'm not sure, but that solidified my takes on him. I think, you know, my takes are fairly well documented on this channel on what I think about Edwards. I think he's a future MVP probably. I think he is going to be, you know, a top 10, top 5 player in the league eventually, and he's getting there faster than I even thought he would. Now, his rookie season, he averaged 19 points per game, just barely missed out on Rookie of the Year to LaMelo Ball. Then he followed that up by averaging 20 points his second season, helping the Timberwolves make their first playoffs since, you know, Jimmy Butler, and before that, since Kevin Garnett, right? And then this last season was able to become a first-time All-Star, averaged nearly 25 points per game. And again, I mean, you can really deep dive into his playoff stuff, but that's where he gets better. His first time in the playoffs last season averaged 25. This last season, he averaged over 30 points per game. And obviously, he's a primary scorer, but he can play defense. He can shoot the ball. In the playoffs this last year, he shot 35% from 3. He averaged 1.8 steals per game, 2 blocks per game. Like, this is a two-way superstar in our league, and he arguably might be the best shooting guard in the entirety of the NBA. And then I think he might be poised for yet another jump, because when we look at what he's been doing with Team USA, and this is, I mean, when we're looking at Team USA, and obviously I've covered a lot of the guys on Team USA in some of the recent videos, whether it's the Pacers video with Halliburton, the Magic video with Bonchero, the recent Knicks video with Jalen Brunson, or even the Nets video with Mikal Bridges. I've been talking a lot about the guys on Team USA because I think this team is young, fun, there's a lot of potential on this team, and Anthony Edwards might have more potential than any of them, right? Obviously, I mean, we had that clip of Paul George talking about how this is a young team and he's kind of becoming the alpha of the team, and that couldn't be more apparent than on the court, where he's actually stepping up and leading this team to wins. And we'll get into some more of his specific stats, but yeah, I mean, there are plenty of guys on this team that, like, realistically should have more veteran credibility. And obviously, you know, these guys aren't like 28 years old that are like true vets, but they should have more veteran credibility. And, you know, Edwards shouldn't just be stepping in and pushing him to the side, but he's just that good. He's just that good. I mean, beyond as it goes for performers so far from Team USA, I think it's Edwards number 1. I think Brunson is probably up there. I think Jaren Jackson has been super important to this team, although maybe not being, you know, a number 1 or a number 2 sort of performer for this team. And then, you know, beyond that, like Bobby Portis has been very important. Bonchero started to step it up. Tyrese Halliburton has continued to be a good player. And I think the biggest disappointment has been Brandon Ingram, but that's for a different video for a different day. But Edwards has by far been, I think, the best player and the clear standout so far. In, you know, the first group phase, he averaged 16 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3 assists in 20 minutes. And he was able to win player of the game versus Jordan, where, you know, he led that team with 22 points, shot 50% from the field and 60% from 3. And that's in a very, very competitive, you know, international scene. Like, most people were not picking Team USA to really be a threat here. I mean, there were talks about Canada. There's always talks about France, who's already been eliminated. And I mean, there's New Zealand, Australia, Slovenia, Greece. Like, there's lots of teams that, get a lot of respect because there's a lot of very, very good international players. And Team USA was kind of talked about as a disappointment because LeBron James and Steph Curry weren't playing. But Anthony Edwards has made up for all of that because he's been just as good as it seems like one of them playing, right? Beyond that, he had 14 points and 7 rebounds versus New Zealand. He started all 5 games so far. I think he's been phenomenal, and I think it could lead to another jump. I mean, this is something that's happened for a plethora of players throughout history, is we've seen them go to Team USA, and it kind of unlocks something after you go to Team USA, after you find that international success, because it's not like you're a number 1 pick drafted to, a sorry team in which it's kind of like, hey, we need you to save us, or hey, we have some pieces, but like, you're the guy, just go score, go win us games, do what you got to do, which he's already dealt with that side of things, right? Obviously, when he was drafted to the Timberwolves, they had Cat, they had D'Lo, etc. They ended up trading for Rudy, who we'll get into that Cat and Rudy trade here in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, he was kind of thrust in the mold of like, hey, this team got the number 1 overall pick. They clearly need you. Go out there and do stuff. Got him to the playoffs in his second year, made an all-star game his second season. Like, he's continued to improve. And so he's already dealt with kind of that carrying aspect of maybe a lesser team from a grand perspective, right? Not a championship team. Before he got there, wasn't a playoff team, right? And now he's kind of been thrust into the situation where he's playing with all the other top-end guys that are all leading their teams to the playoffs. And he's pushing them to the side. He's saying, no. I'm Anthony Edwards. I got this, right? And he's winning games by doing that. And he's showing out. I think, the coaches love him, obviously, for, being able to just put the ball in his hands and be like, yeah, look, we have all these all-stars, all these, future potential Hall of Famers, Defensive Player of the Years. No. We want you. You might only be a one-time all-star. You might only be, 22 years old, right? He is, he's 21, 22 years old. And they're like, no. You are going to go represent the country, and he's doing it at a phenomenal level. So I think, between his off-court personality, which is amazing. I mean, Anthony Edwards is probably one of the funniest players in the NBA, whether it's just in normal interviews, it's just in any clips that you see of him just talking to his teammates. Even when he was in the movie Hustle, right? Like, he's been so funny, such a great personality, seems like such a great person, has really worked on his game as much as you could ask of a young player, especially nowadays when, this guy was given millions of dollars at the age of 19, 20 years old, and he's continued to strive to get better and be the best that he can. And so, you combine that with his on-court play, and man, the sky is the limit for Anthony Edwards. The sky's the limit for Anthony Edwards. I can't say that enough. But he's not the only player on this team. He's obviously not the only player on this team. I think he's the player that deserves the most praise right now. But there is some question marks about this team. Obviously, I'm not sure if I've talked about the Rudy Gobert trade on this channel, but I'll give my brief thoughts. When it happened, I thought it was an awful trade for the Timberwolves. I didn't even understand doing the Twin Towers thing. I got the fact of, I understood what they were going for, but I didn't agree with, trying to accomplish that in today's game. And especially, just with the not switchability from either of those bigs to really switch out onto the perimeter. That's kind of my gist of it. I didn't think anybody was going to trade nearly as much as the Timberwolves did for Rudy Gobert. In fact, I thought it was closer to more of like the Jazz need to get rid of him, and it's going to end up being a negative asset. And then Donovan Mitchell would ask out from there, not, hey, we're going to get a shit ton for Rudy Gobert. We might as well trade Donovan Mitchell and get a shit ton for him too if Cleveland's willing to offer it. And let's just go be Oklahoma City Part 2, which is exactly what Utah did, right? So I think, honestly, Utah fleeced the Timberwolves in the Gobert trade. But a lot of people are starting to think that maybe it's not as bad as we think. And hindsight is always 20/20, maybe 2021. I don't know how you want to put that anymore. But obviously, the trade was bad. But there is some silver linings in the fact that, okay, you've made the playoffs, right? And it wasn't like a major regression this last year, although, you still dealt with difficulties. You weren't exactly fully healthy once you got to the playoffs because Jaden McDaniels, had that moment where he got super mad. I don't think he realized there was concrete behind the wall when he punched it, broke his hand, was out for the playoffs. Is what it is at this point, right? Obviously, you would have loved to have him there being such a great two-way defender, but you weren't at full strength necessarily, and you ended up playing and losing to the eventual champions, right? So there is some silver linings there. And a lot of people are saying trade Karl-Anthony Towns, like move on from Karl-Anthony Towns. Let's see what assets you can get for Karl-Anthony Towns that can kind of allow you to recuperate for that Gobert trade and add more to this team. And some people think that will be enough to kind of build around Anthony Edwards. Now, I don't know who would trade for Rudy Gobert. I understand that Karl-Anthony Towns has much more trade value. He doesn't have the value he used to have, where it was kind of, when you were looking at centers, it was like Jokic and Embiid, and then Cat was probably third, right? Now it's like, okay, Jokic, Embiid, Bam, etc. Like, Cat kind of falls in that second or third category of center at this point. He's obviously played power forward this last season next to Gobert. And so I don't know, it's a big question mark. How much does it translate to the playoffs? Because every time he's been to the playoffs, he hasn't, been phenomenal. I mean, when we look at Cat's playoff numbers, he obviously, we know what he is in the regular season, 20 to 25 point per game scorer, but he's made 3 runs to the playoffs. He's only scored 20 points in one playoff run. Every other time it seems to be a decline. His 3-point percentage has gone down every year except for in 2021, 2022. And so it hasn't necessarily translated. There's question marks there, but I just don't think you can trade. Like, I think Cat provides more than Gobert does right now especially next to Anthony Edwards. He fits your timeline more. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns, who is 27 going on 28 years old, I think fits the timeline, not exactly the timeline of Anthony Edwards, but fits it a lot better than a guy like Rudy Gobert, who's 31 going on 32 years old. And that 3-4 years difference makes a big difference when we're talking about a guy in Anthony Edwards who really won't hit his prime for another 3 or 4 years, because in 3 or 4 years, Gobert is going to be 35, 36, right? Karl-Anthony Towns will be just the age that Gobert is now. And so that's huge when you think of kind of a future perspective. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult because Gobert is making just an absolute crap ton of money. His contract does not fall off the books anytime soon. And so, the big thing is, like, who's going to trade for him? Is it mostly just a salary dump? And that kind of puts you in the position of, would you rather salary dump Gobert and free up that spacing for Edwards? Because when Edwards is a phenomenal driver to the rim, obviously he can shoot the ball, and he's shown that effectively in the NBA. But his number one asset is being able to get downhill as an athletic guard and make you pay for, having a non-rim protecting center, or not a great defender on him, right? That's I think his number one asset, and that's a little bit more limited with Rudy Gobert, right? Obviously, Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert work very well together, and I think Mike Conley will continue to be good for this team next year as he kind of provides that consistent playmaking for this team. But I do think that, in my opinion, it's better to kind of just take the loss and the salary dump aspect of Rudy Gobert rather than trying to mix and match this roster by trading away Cat and thinking that you get the pieces that kind of fill out this roster a little bit better. And I'm not saying that I'm, the perfect person to make this decision. Obviously, I would have the job if I was, right? There's a reason that the NBA GMs get paid what they do, because at the end of the day, they've done it for such a long time. A lot of them make bad decisions, a lot of them make good decisions, but they have earned that, respect and credibility to make those decisions. In my opinion, I would not trade Cat. I would stick with my 2 number 1 picks from Timberwolves, recent Timberwolves history that don't include Andrew Wiggins, and who I think would be very good for this team. I do think he would fit in very well now. But, in Anthony Edwards and Cat, and try to go forward with them rather than trying to do an Ant and Gobert duo, because how similar have we seen that before? How similar have we seen Mike Conley, a very good playmaking point guard, Rudy Gobert, a defensive player of the year level center, and a very good slashing shooting guard who can stretch the floor and carry a team's offense? I feel like I've seen that before. It was Utah. It was Utah with Donovan Mitchell, and it didn't win them anything there either. And they had a great team builder on them. Bogdan was there, or Bojan, sorry. I always mix up their names. That's my bad. And then Jay Crowder, Like, they had other good pieces, Royce O'Neal. They built a very good defensive team over there, but at the end of the day, the offense kind of dwindled down, and it was like, okay, we have one guy we have to guard on offense for the other team, and that was Donovan Mitchell. And I think you'd run into the same situation here where it would be like, okay, we have to guard Anthony Edwards. Beyond that, let anybody do their thing, which obviously that makes sense. Most stars are going to get more attention, right? But it didn't work to such a degree in Utah that I don't know why, as a Timberwolves front office, you would look at it and be like, you know what? Anthony Edwards, Donovan Mitchell, they're both two of the best shooting guards in the game right now. Yeah, we're just going to do the same thing and it's going to work out better. Like, what kind of reasoning is there? I just don't think that whatever return you would get for Cat would build up this team enough to the point where you would win a championship. And if your goal isn't to win a championship sooner than later, then why would you keep the older guy and Gobert? And if your goal isn't to win a championship sooner than later, then you're also going to have to look at pipeline point guards who you would have to replace Mike Conley with, because Mike Conley isn't young by any stretch of the imagination. This guy is, 35 going on 36 years old. And so how much longer he's going to be able to play at the level he is in question. I mean, he's missed more games recently. He only played 67 games this last season, and his production has been on a steady decline ever since 2016. So maybe I guess you could say 2018, even though he made an all-star team in Utah, but his production has been on a steady decline since. He's still a very good and consistent high-end point guard, but he's 36 years old, and you can only expect that for so much longer. So if you're gonna trade Cat, then you'd expect to win more now than anything, because you'd expect those assets to kind of come to fruition for that. But I just don't think that's going to work, and I think you'll end up finding yourself in a state of mediocrity around Anthony Edwards, where you end up in the post Shaq, pre Gasol era with Kobe, where Anthony Edwards is going to be like, there's nobody around here, I have to do everything, get me out of here. And as much as I like him on the court and off the court, eventually a player gets sick of being the only option for a team. And that's what the route of keeping Gobert over Cat looks like to me. Now, again, who would trade for Gobert, right? So maybe you stick with them for another season, whatever it is. Maybe trade deadline, you decide then. I would at least probably go with the route for one more season, just because of how much you gave up for Gobert. But say we get to next offseason, we're kind of in a similar boat. Edwards has progressed a little bit more. Maybe you win a playoff round. Maybe you don't. Maybe Gobert or Cat shows that that's the person that you want to trade. Okay, you go from there at that point. But who would trade for Gobert? I think your best, you look around the league, who's most likely. It's going to be kind of a similar team in your boat of like an up and coming team that doesn't really have a center that they need kind of as an anchor defensively or whatever. Obviously that makes sense with Gobert's defensive ability, but that has like a young offensive star, in which they would kind of go that Utah model because they don't have the talent that you have currently, and you would kind of go towards more of a spacing model where you have Cat, you have Edwards, you have McDaniels, and then Mike Conley, whatever else you kind of throw in there, Kyle Anderson, etc., right? And so I think this next offseason will be huge for this team. I think this year, this team will kind of be about where they were last year, kind of a 5 to 7 seed. It's really hard to predict Western Conference playoff seeding, just because of especially how close it was last year. Subtle changes between role players can change seeding at this point in the Western Conference, just because of how tight everything is. There's still question marks with Dame and James Harden and trades like that. Who knows if another star will want to be traded at the deadline and what will happen there. So if I had to throw out a seeding, I'd say probably somewhere between 5 and 7, maybe just in the playing game or just out of it. We'll see. I think the Timberwolves are a playoff team for this next season, but I do think following this next season, you have to make that decision of, do we trade Gobert or do we trade Cat? If you trade Gobert, I think you'd look at a team like Portland at that point, who might want, a defensive center that can kind of pair with some of their wings and guards that they have, like Jeremy Grant, Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, etc. Or maybe a team like Charlotte, who, if Mark Williams doesn't develop in the way that they want this season, maybe they go get a guy that can kind of be a defensive anchor. Obviously, we know LaMelo's, not the best defender in the world. Terry Rozier is not the best defender in the world. Cap falls off for them with Gordon Hayward following that, so that would open up some money for them. And then they would be able to kind of go from there and, look at some younger teams to move Gobert. Who knows? Maybe he ends up on San Antonio with Vic, like he would have on the international team had Vic played this year. We'll have to wait and see. Regardless, let me know, do you guys think Anthony Edwards will eventually win an MVP? How good do you think he'll be this year? How good do you think the Timberwolves will be this year? And yeah, that's going to be it from me. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.
Exactly what you guys see on Twitter and social media all the time. That is him. I even got to tell this story, yeah. Remember Dame and Donovan just kept shooting from half court? Me and Ant sitting on the bench. We didn't even really play that much like that. We were just along for the ride at that point. But Dame pulled up from probably 3 steps behind the logo. Ant, look at me. He shot that from Yucatan. I said, Yucatan? What did you just say? He's like, Yucatan. I said, is that a real place? He's like, nah, that's how far that was. I said, what?